We are going to talk about actually getting into the war. So find out where the book is and go to page 224, just like the road, Route 224. And when you get there, I want you to look at the very opening page because it has people to meet, place to locate, and terms to know. Probably all those things will be on the quiz. Quiz is going to be over section 1 and 2, and it'll be 20 questions or so. All right, so um, you might want to know these kind of things. All right, in a letter to King George, General Gates was talking about the Patriots and how they were fighting. He said they had spirited up such a rage and enthusiasm unlike they'd ever seen before. So he's really giving them a compliment, saying these people are so passionate about what they're doing and they're fighting their hearts out. But in the long run, we know that they can never beat the English army, could they? Don't tell George Washington that. Don't tell him that because we've already heard the end of the story and we know who wins, right? But at this time, the British still think that they're going to be winning. So the Continental Army isn't just with George Washington. There are other generals too. Washington is the general over the whole army, but the army is spreading out, and there's some that are already up by Fort Ticonderoga. That is up by New Hampshire, might even be Vermont area, and they're going to go into Canada. Hopefully, the French Canadians will help them. Do you think France really wants to get involved in this war? They don't like the British. They hate the British. But they've been fighting them for hundreds of years, and they really don't want to get involved. But there will be some in Canada that like to fight. They may get involved. So here we go. Continental Army is hoping that the French will support them. And this man right here, I should better get my pointer out so you can see, could have these. Richard Montgomery. Richard Montgomery, Colonial Army, he marches from Fort Ticonderoga to capture Montreal in Canada on November 13th, 1775. So he's on the march. He's on the go. And then we have this guy here, Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold pushed through the winter storms to Quebec on New Year's Eve. He attacks in 1775. We all know who Benedict Arnold is. But let me tell you the story about how he's going to get there. Okay, he's going to meet up with Richard Montgomery. Montgomery's got about 500 men, and Arnold's got about 600 men. So they are going to meet up together and fight this battle in Quebec against the British. To get there, Arnold has to go through about 400 miles of woods. 400 miles of woods. So he has guys having to cut trees down just to get through it. They're cold, they're freezing, they're starving. The weather is just terrible because it is December, right? And these guys are eating everything they can get their hands on, including tree bark, candles, and shoe leather. So let's think about that for a second. Have you ever eaten tree bark? And if you did, how'd you do it? Well, you don't actually eat the outside of the tree. Have you ever seen where a bark has actually come off the tree? You want to eat the inside of the bark. You can scrape that with a knife and eat that. Bugs and worms and all kind of things just love that stuff. It's they call that the meat of the tree, the meat of the bark. Okay, so you can't eat that. It's not going to kill you. I don't know how much it's going to fill you, but you can eat it. It's pretty watery, tell you the truth. How about the second thing? Candles. I hope you're not eating your mom's candles that are on the table. It probably tastes pretty funny if you did. They've got paraffin wax in them, so you can't eat candles. I suppose you could if you really wanted to, but they're not going to fill you up. They're going to probably make you sick. The candles they had back in this time were made of animal fat. Now you can eat those. So you can eat animal fat. It might even have a little bit of nutrition to it. So let me ask you a question. Would you eat a candle like a carrot or like a corn on the cob? But they could eat that. And what about leather? What is leather? Well, it's in my shoes. It is in your shoes, but can you eat it? Well, what it really is, pure leather, is cow skin. Cow skin. Now, you eat chicken, don't you? Well, you eat chicken skin. Why can't you eat cow skin? It's a little bit thicker and it's a little bit harder to chew on. It doesn't digest like chicken skin does. But I guess if they had to, they would eat it. A lot of these guys were getting frostbite, losing their toes and their fingers and their nose and their ears on your cheeks. It's a terrible thing that they're going through, but they're going to get there. So let's go on. Wanted to show you a map where Montreal is. They're going to be going to Quebec. All right, so Montreal to Quebec. He's going to meet up with Mr. Montgomery. So I know this is a lot here, so let's see if we can read this. Montgomery's army was departing due to enlistments. In other words, he was losing men because their time at being in the service was over. So with him, he had about 300 men. And on his way to Quebec City, he runs into James Livingston. And James Livingston has the new 1st Canadian Regiment with about 200 men. So he gains his 200 men back. So now he's got about 500. Benedict Arnold, as I said, had about 600 guys, and they had to go 400 miles just to get there. So when they finally all meet up, they have this battle. It's not good. The Continentals lose the battle. They lose, about 48, 50 men. That's just the ones that died. Here's the stats. Whoop, let me go back. See if it'll take me. There it is. We have 1,200 men. They have 1,800. We lose 48 people. They only lose 5. We have 34 men that are wounded. They have 14. But here's the big number. 431 men of our men are captured, none of theirs. So if you're captured, you're probably one of the lucky ones. Because if you're wounded and you're captured, they put you in a nice warm place. They got to feed you. They kind of take care of you. Think of the guys that were wounded that didn't get captured. They're out in the woods someplace trying to make some kind of a shelter, even if they have a tent, right? And if they're wounded, it's even worse because you can't make a fire. No firewood is dry. Nothing's dry, so it takes quite a while. Well, what Benedict Arnold decides is we better hang around here for a while. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't go too good for the rest of the guys. General Montgomery was killed. Benedict Arnold was wounded in his left leg. I think it was his left leg. Pretty bad. And Daniel Morgan, who was a colonel, which will later become a general, is captured, so he's on the inside. That's why Morgan decides, or I'm sorry, that's why Benedict Arnold decides we better stay here for a little while because maybe they'll let our guys go. Well, certain enough, they did. Not until March. And it's not like they were going to attack them again. They let all the other guys go. They let everybody go. Just go home. So they did. They went home. But on the way home, Benedict Arnold kind of made a little detour. And that's just Benedict Arnold's style. What he did was he got on a bunch of different ships, little boats, I should say, not ships, not like big pirate boats, smaller boats. And he blocked up Lake Champlain. He blocked it up so the British couldn't get down. And he kept it blocked up for a good portion of probably the whole year until 1777, the British finally got through. Well, why was that important? Because if he wouldn't have, they would have been on to Washington. Yes, they would have. They would have probably found out where he was and they would have attacked and they would have had more supplies and more men. Benedict Arnold stopped that. So he really saved Washington's army. That's how important he was. He really was. He was a fighting general. He didn't fight from behind. He fought from the front, killed men himself, was in battle, actually. Even though they told him to stay in the back, he couldn't do it. So, great general he was, Benedict Arnold. So let's go on. Now, before we get to New York campaigns, I want to read something to you here. It's on page 225, so you can follow along where it says Dorchester Heights. So this is kind of like your participation time. Battle of Bunker Hill, the British lost a lot of men and they lost a lot of supplies. So General Howe just decided we'll just stay in Boston here. And Boston is like a peninsula. So imagine this is Boston. Over here is Dorchester Heights. There's water in between all around it. So General Howe wanted Dorchester Heights to be occupied by British soldiers. Get up there, get some cannons up there, and protect Boston. Well, one day he was seeing men working up there, and he told his subordinate, "I see you have your men up there working." He said, "No, sir. No, sir, I don't." He said, "Well, who's up there?" It's General Washington. How did Washington get up from behind us? Well, he did. He got up there all right, just in time. In that springtime, those 50 cannons from Ticonderoga that we talked about quite a few pages ago got there. So here's Washington. He's got cannons pointed down at Boston now. Not too good for General Howe, who doesn't have enough men, doesn't have enough ammunition, and nobody's coming to help him. So Washington sends him a letter. Either get out or we're coming in. He decides to leave. And as he leaves, you have 1,500 loyalists that want to go with him because they're afraid if Washington comes into the town of Boston that they'll be killed or tortured. So he said, all right. And I think there was 3 ships they had to take. They took him up to Halifax, Canada, and he spent some time up there. Now, Washington and his men were moving down into Boston, and he gave them an order. And the order was this: don't break any windows, don't burn any stores, don't hurt any people. This is our town. We're taking care of this town. If I hear of anybody causing a ruckus, you're going to be brought into the street and whipped. They would whip somebody? Yes, they would. Fortunately, nobody broke the rules. And there were some loyalists that actually stayed, and they were afraid for their lives, but they weren't touched. Washington had complete control over his men there, had complete control. So they respected him, and they did what he asked. Kind of nice. Kind of nice. Now, he would stay there for a little while, and then he'd have to move on. And here's the reason why. This New York campaign, General Howe comes back, and Washington gets wind that he's going to be coming into New York City. But where will he come in at? Manhattan or in Long Island? He won't come right into the harbor. So Washington has to get himself down there and his men before Howe can get there. Because here's what General Howe feels the reason why he needs to go to New York. So look at these 2 blue things I have right here. And I'll be sending you all these slides. He could easily move his men anywhere to Philadelphia or north to New England if he was in New York. That's good. Second thing is, he could split up the colonies, the north and the south, so they couldn't find each other. They couldn't meet up with each other. That's a good idea too. But still, where's he coming in at? Where is he going to come in? On page 225, there's a flag there. Can you see it? It's called the First Stars and Stripes. So every so often, the book will give you one of these. I really like these because it tells you about our history. So let's read this. First Stars and Stripes, 1777 1795. After the Declaration of Independence, the British flag lost its meaning as part of the United States flag. Used to have part of the British flag inside the American flag, if you remember that. Thus, the Continental Congress in June 14, 1777, designed a new flag, the First Stars and Stripes. It determined that the flag of the United States should be 13 stripes, alternate red and white, that the Union, the corner, should be 13 stars in a blue field, representing a new constellation. So that's the kind of flag we have today. So what do the colors mean? Well, the red means courage. Red means courage. The white means purest ideals. The purest ideals. And the blue means strength and unity. That's what we have our flag. Now, this flag that they designed would not be the official flag, only flag. It wasn't official, but there was no United States yet. You see this flag right behind me, the 1776. That was a flag. The yellow flag was "Don't tread on me." That was a flag. If you were in any kind of a company from any different colony or state, I might call them now, you had your own flag. So there was flags flying every place. Everybody had a different flag except the British. They had their own flag. So eventually, this flag would be the flag. It had 13 stars on it. I asked somebody today, how many stars does our flag have on it now? Somebody said 50 or so. 50 or so? Of course we know it's 50, not more, just 50, right? I hope you knew that. Did you know that? If not, we're in trouble. All right, let's go on. Now, the important thing is knowing how many men that Washington has. He's got about 19,000. At the most he ever had was about 20,000 men. And he does something that no commander wants to do, and that's split up his troops. Because once you split up your troops, you split up your power, right? But he has to because he doesn't know where Howe is coming in at. So he sends 9,000 men to Manhattan Island and 10,000 men to Long Island. He goes to Long Island with them. And sure enough, that's where Howe comes in, Long Island. So the fight starts. And it's on Brooklyn Heights that he starts to realize we are getting flanked from the front and the rear. We're being surrounded. What do we do, General? We got to run. We have to run. We are not going to surrender. And he doesn't surrender. Now, some of the men are being taken prisoner. Some are being shot and killed, including being very close to capturing Washington himself. Now, a lot of people might think, well, they probably wanted to kill Washington. No, they didn't. They didn't want to kill him, especially General Howe. He wanted to capture Washington. He wanted to make a spectacle of him. He wanted to humiliate him in front of all of the people and show them that he is not the leader he says he is. But they can't catch him, and they don't know Washington. So just when they think they got him, he gets away. And he comes back even stronger than ever. So sometimes when they think they got the leader, they really don't. Not yet. Remember, what always goes around comes around. So Washington's going to have his time. Yes, he is. But right now, he's got to run. And what he does is that he saves his complete army. He saves his army. And look what he does here. He gets across the East River, and he gets on the other side just in time to Manhattan. He gets across the other side. Well, that East River is pretty wide, pretty wide. And he tells his colonel, Colonel Glover, I want to go across that river. Well, that's great, sir. How do you suppose to get across that river? Well, we need boats. That's good. Where are you going to get the boats? I don't care where you get the boats. I'm telling you, you go find those boats. And what we are going to pay for those boats, sir? Continental script. Well, how much is continental script worth? Nothing. Nothing. Right? But I still need the boats. So he does get the boats, and I'm talking rowboats. Okay, not big boats, rowboats. They get across just in time because the British warships are coming down the river. So they would have blown them out of the water. Isn't that something? That's something. So he makes it across. His men are beat up. They're beat up pretty bad, pretty bad. But he makes it across just in time to find out this. The British are now going to attack again, this time Manhattan Island, just where he's at. Now, where's his other men at? Well, they're over there. The 9,000 that he left there with General Lee and General Gates. Now, they're all fighting, but they're running for their lives because he takes a position on Harlem Heights and it's not going well. So they have to retreat. They have to retreat again. Now, it's something that we think about New York, the way it is today, at least where the city is, of what it looks like. It didn't look like that at all. It didn't look like that at all. There were some buildings, but mostly woods, a lot of open spaces. So as they were digging for these buildings all these years, they were finding relics from the Revolutionary War, buttons, buckles, leathers, and things like that. Because as these guys run, they drop things. They drop things. It wasn't more than probably about 8 or 9 years ago. They were digging a foundation for a building. And they came across some skeletons, some bones, some bodies. more than one. I think there was about 30, 32. They thought, could these be revolutionary soldiers that were buried? But did they take time to stop and bury their soldiers? What they realized it was a cemetery for slaves. Slaves. Wow. Before the revolution, slaves. I thought only the Southerners had slaves. Everybody had slaves up there, north and south. And so what they had to do was to rebury them and land somewhere else that somebody had donated. That was nice. So now they're resting peacefully someplace else where they should be. No headstones because they don't know who they were. There was no headstones when they dug them up. That's a shame. So let's go on. Retreat to New Jersey. Now, I told you they're running from Manhattan Island. They have to do something. Washington only has about 1,500 men with him now because they're either captured, wounded, or dead. Where's the other two generals? They took off. He doesn't know where they're at. They're all split. So there's three generals going three different ways. So here's what he does. He begins a retreat across New Jersey, across the Delaware River to Pennsylvania, right across from Trenton, New Jersey, about 10 miles south of Trenton, New Jersey. December 1776. It is cold outside. It is cold. Lucky the river isn't frozen over yet. Just in time because a British general, Charles Cornwallis, is coming after him with 20,000 men. 20,000 against his hut. 3,000 men. That's all he's got left. 3,000. He had 1,500 taken. He's only got 3,000 left. Not very well. Not very well at all. But he does make it across the river because General Howe calls off the fight. He tells Cornwallis, stand down. Why would I stand down? I can get him. He's right there. Stand down. It's wintertime. It's time for us to take a break. What does that mean? It means the soldiers would not fight in the wintertime. So they don't chase him. Good thing for Washington and his army. Real good thing. It saved his army. They stopped. They stopped. So they have to make plans now on what they're going to do. They have to make plans. So I'm going to ask you about something. Do you ever think about spies? Spies in the army? Well, did you ever hear that George Washington cut down a cherry tree? No, he didn't. Did he have wooden teeth? No. Remember when he said, I cannot tell a lie? Oh, yes, he could. Everybody can tell a lie. And so, having spies, you have to tell a lie. But there's one spy that I want you to know who he is. And his name is Nathan Hale. Nathan Hale is about 21 years old, from Connecticut, school teacher. Got to watch them school teachers. And he was a captain in Knowlton's Rangers for the Continentals. Now, he was also a spy for General Washington. So when he would spy, he would go not in a uniform, he would go dressed as just anybody else. He would blend in so nobody would know who he is. Now, he was so young that they didn't take him for serious anyway. So he could walk around any town and nobody would be the wiser. He would sit sometimes in a tavern. He could listen to what all the British were saying. He was in enemy territory. If he got caught, he could get hung. He really could. If they found out he was a spy, they would hang him. So he was in New York at one time. Happened to be there for a little while, trying to find out some information. Somebody recognized him. It was his cousin Samuel. Samuel said, "What are you doing here?" Well, I just came to made up some kind of story. Samuel was a Tory, and he knew that Nathan was a patriot. He told on him. He ratted him out. I don't know if he got money for it or not. Later on, he said he didn't do it, but of course, we know he probably did. Anyway, on September 21st, they arrested him. They took him to Manhattan on the 21st of 1776, I'm sorry. They hanged him the next day. The next day. And they left his body on display, hanging from a tree for 2 days. somebody guarding him. A British guard was guarding him. You imagine getting that job? I don't want to stand next to this guy. Or he doesn't talk much. But he's starting to stink. Not for very long. After 2 days, they let somebody come cut him down. And they buried Nathan Hale. Problem is, nobody knows where he's at. That's right. They hid his body so the British would never find him. Because the British have a tendency to want to display you in pieces. Remember Metacomet? Yeah, they hung him from a tree in about 5 different parts. So we don't know where Nathan Hale is. Maybe one day they'll dig him up too. I don't know. I don't know. Poor Nathan Hale. He'd been down there for way over 250 years or so. So let's see what he looks like. There he is right there. Young fella, only 21 years old. And when he was on that horse with his hands tied behind his back and a noose around his neck, they asked him, "So you have any last words you want to say? You might want to write this down." Here's what he says: "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." But that really stuck it to him. He said, "If I could do this over and over and over and over again," he said, "I would. That's how much I hate you all because I love freedom." Would you give up your life for freedom at 21 years old? People do. People do all the time that fight in the service. People that fight for freedom. Sometimes words are not enough and they have to fight it out. That's what they were doing in this revolution. Now, I don't know if he ever killed anybody. Being a soldier, he could have, but he was on a mission undercover, got caught. Now, if he was in a uniform, they would probably just arrest him and put him in prison. But since he was a soldier and he was in regular clothes, he was considered a spy, and all spies hang. Yes, they do. Now, there was some um, pretty neat things about some of the spies they had. They spent lots of money. Matter of fact, look how much George Washington spent on just the spies. He had to pay these spies $17,000, or 10% of all the money expenses that he had, he spent on espionage, on spying. That's a lot of lying. That's a lot of spying. So if you were a spy for George Washington and you had good information, you paid for it. I'm sure there was some that got paid by Washington and also the British double agents. Now, if they got caught by either side, guess what? They would hang. Yep. Some of the best spies we had were women because nobody suspected women, and they did some pretty cool things to get information. Some of them, I'll tell you one little story, had a young son that on his jacket he had buttons that were covered with cloth. She would take the button off, take the cloth off the button, put a message behind it, and sew it all back together, send him to wherever the Continentals were. That was pretty slick, wasn't it? So we're going to talk more about spies. This, okay? So until then, hey, have a good weekend and stay safe. It's supposed to be nice out. It's nice out right now, but I'm about ready to go home. So I'll see you later. Bye.